Whilst fashion designer Hugo Boss is a brand renowned for its stylish designs, there is unfortunately a dark side to this business, dating all the way back to the 1930s and 40s, as at this time, the brand was linked to the Nazi Party of Germany and in quite an astounding way. In this video, we go behind the scenes to look into the dark and disturbing history of Hugo Boss. First, it's important to have a look at the history of the brand. As you may expect, the brand was established by a man of the same name. In 1924, Hugo Ferdinand Boss created his now iconic brand in Metzingen, Germany. At the time, the company produced jackets, shirts, work clothing and sportswear. Pretty commonplace for a clothing brand startup then, right? The establishment story of Hugo Boss isn't anything particularly interesting. Where things start to become a bit more dark though is a few years later. During the 1930s and 40s, Nazism became prominent in Germany, and this is where the dark Hugo Boss link comes in, as during the Nazi rule, the brand was tasked with manufacturing uniforms for the German Army and SS. Yep, you heard that right. During World War II, Hugo Boss was one of the main suppliers of uniforms for the Nazi regime. The company manufactured SS uniforms as well as other military gear, including jackets, coats and trousers. Now, in Hugo Boss's defense, one could argue that this was simply an operational error of the time. Whilst it is arguably a large reputational stain, we've looked at countless businesses before on the channel which have disregarded ethics to make a quick buck. And if the story ended here, there may be a case for that argument. And whilst it's obvious that nobody is trying to justify this behaviour, evil occurs in big business all the time to varying degrees. The thing is though, the manufacturing of uniforms isn't anywhere near the darkest part of this story, as it gets much worse. To add insult to injury, the company used forced labour, including prisoners of war and concentration camp inmates, who were forced to produce these uniforms. It's estimated that at least 1,000 forced labourers worked for Hugo Boss during this dark period for humanity. And despite the fact that Boss himself was not a member of the Nazi Party, he actively supported its ideology and was a sponsor of the SS, one of the most notorious organisations within the Nazi Party. Clearly therefore, we are not just looking at an operational error here, it's significantly worse than that. Uniforms for what you may consider the most reprehensible organisation ever, created by forced labourers, and a brand ethos that actively supports these dark and sinister processes. Can you get any worse than that? Understandably, consequences of the prominent connection to the Nazi Party were significant. In the aftermath of World War II, Boss himself was arrested and investigated by the Allied authorities due to his association with the Nazi regime. He was then fined and stripped of his voting rights for 20 years, although despite this, the brand continued to manufacture uniforms for the German army after World War II. And it wasn't until the 1990s that the company decided to officially apologise for its role in the Nazi regime. Quite astonishing really. As one may expect, the Hugo Boss link to the Nazi Party had a profound effect on the brand's image and reputation. And despite the fact the company has apologised in the past, many people still associate the brand with fascism and anti-Semitism, which has led to calls for a boycott of the brand, with many people refusing to buy Hugo Boss products because of the brand's history. And whilst the Hugo Boss affiliation with the Nazi Party may be a thing of the past, it's easy to see why many people are still upset with the brand. With such a lamentable past, one could argue it may be forever impossible to recover from such a dark affiliation. Clearly therefore, the Hugo Boss link to the Nazi Party is a dark chapter in the history of the world famous brand. The company's association with the Nazi Party has had far-reaching consequences, both for the brand's reputation and for the people who were forced to work for the company during the war. Whilst the company has apologised for its past actions, the link to the Nazi Party will probably always be a stain on the Hugo Boss brand name. Honestly, it's quite surprising because when you start to look into the history of many big brands, there's so many things that you would not have expected to find, and Hugo Boss is just another example of this. So what do you think to the Hugo Boss connection? Can this kind of stuff ever be undone, or will it forever be a stain on the Hugo Boss name? I want to hear what you have to say on this down below. But thank you so much for joining for this one. It would be massively appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel and of course share these videos out there.